All right, let's dive right in. Today we're looking into the box office performance of Pushpa 2. You guys have sent in a ton of articles on this one, so it looks like you're really curious about it. And I gotta say, the numbers are pretty impressive. It seems this movie is doing exceptionally well, even breaking some records. Let's see what we can uncover. Luckily, I've got our expert here who can help connect the dots and really give us the big picture.
Well, what's really fascinating here is that Pushpa 2's success might actually indicate a larger shift
Yeah.
in how we understand Indian cinema overall.
Okay, I'm all ears, but maybe we should start with the basics just to make sure everyone's on the same page. What exactly is Pushpa 2 all about?
Good point. Pushpa 2. The Rule is the sequel to the 2021 hit Pushpa,
Hmm.
The Rise, and it's a Telugu language action drama starring Allu Arjun as Pushpa Raj. The film was released on December 7th of this year, and the story basically follows Pushpa as he navigates the world of red sandalwood smuggling, facing all sorts of threats from rivals and a very determined police officer named Shekhawat. It's really a story about ambition, loyalty, and those really intense power struggles that you see in that kind of world.
Ah, so it's not just like explosions and car chases. There's some real drama mixed in there, too.
Oh, absolutely.
Hmm.
Pushpa himself is actually a very complex character. He's not your typical hero. He's got his own sort of code of ethics and even faces internal conflicts as the story unfolds.
Okay, that makes sense.
The film really explores what happens when someone gains power in a world as gritty and dangerous as illegal trade.
Right, right. Okay, well, let's move on to those crazy box office numbers then. One article mentioned Pushpa 2 is expected to hit a worldwide gross of 950 crore by the end of day 6. Is that even possible?
It's actually on track to do just that, and what's even more remarkable is how well the Hindi dubbed version is doing. It's brought in an estimated 370.1 crore in just those 6 days, making it the highest grossing South Indian film. Dubbed in Hindi post-COVID, second only to KGF Chapter 2.
Wow. Okay. So just to clarify for our listeners, this is a Telugu film, but it's doing amazingly well in the Hindi-speaking market. That's got to be
It-
significant, right?
We got it. This crossover success is huge. It really suggests that maybe the language barrier isn't as big of a deal as we once thought. We might be moving towards what some people are calling pan-Indian cinema, where films can appeal to audiences across different regions and languages, rather than being confined to specific linguistic groups.
Pan-Indian cinema. I like the sound of that. But let's break down those box office numbers even further. One of the articles had this really interesting day-by-day breakdown of the net collections for Pushpa 2 in India. Okay, so it earned 164.25 crore on its first day. That's incredible. Then there was a little dip on day 2 with 93.8 crore, but then it surged over the weekend, earning 119.25 crore on Saturday and 141.05 crore on Sunday. However, then Monday and Tuesday saw a drop again, bringing in 64.45 crore and 52.50 crore respectively. So those are some pretty wild swings. Can you help us understand this pattern?
Of course. First, it's important to remember that net collections really refers to the distributor's share of the box office revenue after they deduct taxes.
Right.
The initial surge, especially that huge first day, is pretty typical for a highly anticipated film like Pushpa 2. People rush out to see it on opening day,
Yeah.
driven by the hype and the positive word of mouth. The weekend surge is also expected as more people have free time to go to the theater. The dip on Monday and Tuesday most likely reflects a return to normal work schedules, which usually means fewer people are going to the cinema.
So does that mean those weekday numbers are a bad sign? Should we be worried about Pushpa 2's staying power at the box office?
Not necessarily. These fluctuations are actually pretty standard. It's still too early to say if the dip means there's a decline in interest or if it's just the normal weekday trend.
Gotcha.
We'll need to see how the numbers look over the next few weeks to get a clearer picture.
Okay, well, this amazing box office run makes me wonder, can Pushpa 2 maintain this momentum with all the upcoming releases?
That's the big question, isn't it? We know Mufasa, The Lion King, and Baby John are both hitting theaters soon, and those are some big releases that could definitely pose a challenge.
Right, a Disney movie and a buzzworthy new film, that's some serious competition. One article even suggests Pushpa 2 might still reach 600, 700 crore just in the Hindi market during its full run. Do you think that's realistic, given all this competition?
It's definitely possible. Pushpa 2 has tapped into something special, that's for sure. It's generated so much buzz and positive word of mouth. People are really connecting with the characters in the story. And that momentum might be enough to carry it through, even with these other big releases, trying to grab the audience's attention.
So you're saying we shouldn't count Pushpa 2 out just yet. It's already broken records, and it just might have the staying power to keep breaking them. But what does this all mean for the Indian film industry as a whole?
That's a great question, and it's exactly what we'll unpack in the next part of our deep dive. We'll delve into the cultural impact of Pushpa 2, explore how it's been received both in India and globally, and discuss what this success might signal for the future of pan-Indian cinema. Stay tuned. Welcome back to our deep dive into Pushpa 2. We've talked about those record-breaking box office numbers, but now I think it's time to really dig into some of the factors that might be driving this success. What do you think?
Yeah, let's get into it. I'm super curious about what's resonating with audiences and making this film such a hit.
Well, one thing that's really interesting is just how well that Hindi dubbed version is performing. Remember, Pushpa 2 was originally a Telugu film, but it's actually become the highest grossing South Indian film dubbed in Hindi, post-COVID, second only to KGF Chapter 2.
Right, we touched on that a bit earlier. It really does seem like Pushpa 2 is breaking down those language barriers in a big way. What do you think is behind that crossover appeal?
Well, it kind of goes back to that idea of pan-Indian cinema we mentioned before. It's basically a term for films that aim to appeal to audiences
Hmm.
across different regions and languages within India.
Okay.
So historically, Indian cinema has been pretty fragmented, with films mostly catering to specific linguistic groups. But lately, there's been this growing trend of films trying to break free from those boundaries.
Hmm.
And Pushpa 2 is like a perfect example of that.
So it's like Indian cinema is becoming more interconnected, with films from different regions finding a much wider audience. It's pretty cool to see that kind of cultural exchange happening.
Exactly. And Pushpa 2 is really tapping into that. You have a Telugu film,
Yeah.
but it's finding huge success with Hindi-speaking audiences too, which tells you the appeal goes beyond just language.
Right.
There's something about the story, the characters, the whole cinematic experience
Mm.
that's really connecting with people from different backgrounds.
Mm. That's interesting. And speaking of connecting with people, we have to talk about Allu Arjun for a minute. He's the lead actor who plays Pushpa. And he seems to have this massive fan following across India. So how much of a role do you think his star power plays in the film's success?
Oh, it's definitely a major factor.
Mm.
Allu Arjun is incredibly charismatic
Yeah.
and talented.
Yeah.
And he has this huge fan base, especially in South India.
Yeah.
He's known for his energetic performances, his really stylish dance moves, and his ability to portray these complex characters with a lot of depth.
I've actually seen some clips of his dancing in Pushpa too, and they're amazing. Those moves seem to have gone viral online.
Oh, absolutely. The dance sequences in Pushpa 2 are definitely a big part of its appeal. Allu Arjun's a phenomenal dancer, and the choreography is just top-notch.
I bet.
And it's not just about looking cool. Those sequences actually add to the storytelling and can really enhance the emotional impact of certain scenes.
Wow, so they're not just thrown in there for fun. That's really cool. Okay, so it sounds like Pushpa 2 really knows how to entertain. But what about the critics? Have they been as impressed as the audience?
Well, for the most part, the critical reception has been pretty positive. Many reviewers have praised the film's ambitious scope, the action sequences, and the performances, especially Allu Arjun's.
Okay.
But there have been a few mixed reviews, too, with some critics pointing out that the film is quite long and that some of the subplots could have been trimmed down a bit.
So not everyone is totally on board, but it seems like the general consensus is that Pushpa 2 delivers on that promise of action-packed entertainment.
Yeah, exactly. And it's worth noting that the audience reviews have been overwhelmingly positive. People are really connecting with the characters, the story, and the film's overall energy. It seems to have struck a chord.
Okay, so we've talked about the success in India, but is Pushpa 2 making any waves internationally?
Absolutely. The film has actually been released in several countries and is doing really well in overseas markets, particularly in regions with a large Indian diaspora.
Right.
But it's also attracting attention from non-Indian audiences who are just curious about Indian cinema in general.
So Pushpa 2 is going global. This is a Telugu film rooted in its own regional culture, yet it's resonating with people all over the world. That's pretty incredible when you think about it.
It really is, and I think it just speaks to the power of storytelling. When a film is well-made and emotionally engaging, it can transcend those cultural and linguistic barriers.
Totally.
Pushpa 2 is a great example of how Indian cinema is really breaking into that global market. And it's kind of following the footsteps of films like RRR, which also gained a ton of international recognition.
That actually raises a pretty interesting question. With all this global success, is there a risk of losing that authenticity and those cultural nuances that make Indian cinema so unique?
You know, it's a valid concern for sure. As Indian cinema gains a wider audience, There's always the possibility of trying to cater to a more globalized taste. And that might mean sacrificing some of the cultural elements that make Indian films stand out.
Right.
But I think filmmakers are becoming increasingly aware of this challenge.
Yeah.
And they're trying to find that sweet spot between appealing to a global audience while staying true to their cultural roots.
It sounds like a balancing act for sure. But I have faith in the creativity and the talent of those Indian filmmakers. They've consistently delivered such captivating stories that manage to resonate both locally and globally.
I agree. It's definitely an exciting time for Indian cinema. And Pushpa 2 is right at the forefront of this whole evolution. We've covered a lot so far, from cultural impact and critical reception to the film's global reach. But there's one more crucial aspect we need to explore: the money.
Yes. Let's talk about the financial side of the success story. In the next part of our deep dive, we'll analyze the budget, the revenue, and discuss what this financial success could mean for the future of Indian filmmaking. All right, welcome back to our deep dive on Pushpa 2. We talked about the story, the cultural impact, even the awesome dance moves. But now it's time to get down to the nitty-gritty and talk money. What about the financial side of this blockbuster hit?
Yeah, it's pretty interesting when you think about it. The financial success of a film can tell us a lot about its overall reach, its impact, and what it might mean for the industry moving forward.
For sure. So let's break it down. Do we know how much Pushpa 2 actually costs to make?
Well, the sources you sent don't give us a specific budget.
Okay.
But considering the scale of this production, the elaborate sets, all those visual effects, and of course the star-studded cast, it's safe to say this was a pretty big budget film.
Yeah, they definitely didn't hold back. And judging by the box office figures, it seems like that investment is paying off in a big way.
Oh, absolutely. We know Pushpa 2 is on track to hit that 950 crore mark worldwide by the end of day 6, which is huge, especially this early in its run.
And a big chunk of that is coming from the Hindi dubbed version, right? It's already earned something like 370.1 crore, making it a record breaker for South Indian films dubbed in Hindi in the post-COVID era, second only to KGF Chapter 2.
Exactly. But it's important to remember that box office gross doesn't equal pure profit. There are all those distribution costs, marketing expenses, lots of other things to factor in.
Right. It's not as simple as just looking at the total revenue, but even with all those deductions, it sounds like Pushpa 2 is still going to be incredibly profitable.
Yeah, that's very likely. And this level of financial success brings up some really interesting points about what it could mean for the future of Indian cinema.
Yeah, this is where I get really excited. What kind of ripple effects can we expect when a film like Pushpa 2 has this kind of financial success?
Well, for one, it really shows the potential of these big-budget pan-Indian projects.
Yeah.
It's likely that producers and studios will be more willing to invest in films. That can appeal to audiences across India rather than focusing on those traditional regional markets.
So could this lead to a whole new wave of films, all aiming to capture that same pan-Indian magic?
It's definitely possible. Pushpa 2 has shown that it's totally doable to create a film that connects with people across different languages and cultures.
Right.
This success could inspire more filmmakers to try something similar, which would be great. It could lead to a more vibrant and inclusive cinematic landscape overall.
Oh, I love that idea. More diversity, more stories, more talent being recognized. That's a win for everyone, really.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's not just about making more films in the same vein either. This kind of financial success also gives filmmakers more creative freedom. When a film like Pushpa 2 does this well, studios and producers gain confidence to back more ambitious, maybe even riskier projects.
Interesting.
It allows them to explore different narratives, push boundaries, try new things.
So Pushpa 2 might not just be entertaining audiences. It could actually be paving the way for a new wave of really innovative and daring Indian cinema. It's like a catalyst for creative growth.
Exactly. That's a great way to put it. Pushpa 2 might just be the turning point. That encourages both filmmakers and studios to take those creative risks and invest in projects that might have been seen as too unconventional in the past.
Wow, we've covered a lot of ground today. We started with a simple question. Why is Pushpa 2 such a big deal? And now we've explored the story, the cultural impact, those crazy box office numbers, and even what the success might mean for the future of Indian cinema as a whole.
It's been quite the journey, hasn't it? And I think it really highlights just how powerful and influential cinema can be.
Yeah.
It's not just entertainment. It's a reflection of our culture, a platform for storytelling, a force that can really shape the future of an entire industry.
I totally agree. For me, the biggest takeaway here is that Pushpa 2 really shows us what can happen when you combine passion, talent, and a real understanding of the audience. You can create something truly special, something that resonates on so many different levels. It's entertaining, it makes you think, and it's definitely leaving its mark on the film world.
You said it perfectly. Pushpa 2 is a film that's capturing the hearts and minds of millions. It's sparking all these important conversations. And it might just be changing the course of Indian cinema as we know it.
So, to everyone listening, here's something to consider. Pushpa 2 has shown us that Indian cinema has what it takes to reach a truly global audience. The challenge now is to support that growth while also preserving that unique cultural identity that makes Indian films so special.
Well said. And with that, we'll wrap up our deep dive into Pushpa 2. Thanks for joining us on this journey. Until next time, keep exploring, keep asking those questions, and keep diving deep into this fascinating world all around us.